So as we begin our discussion about operations with real numbers, what I want to do is use integers specifically to review the basic rules that exist for our four operations, for adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. Because if we can work with easier numbers like integers to reestablish these rules, these same rules will carry over into the other types of rational numbers and real numbers that we work with. Okay. So a lot of what you're going to see on this page of notes is going to be real quick, just a very, very quick review of things that we should already have a good working knowledge of when it comes to the different operations. So I will start with when we add numbers. By the way, these rules you see are just the terminology I use in my classroom. So it may vary in different classrooms with different teachers, but I like to deal with addition as either being adding numbers with the same signs, in this case, two numbers that are positive or two numbers that are negative, or adding numbers with different signs, in which one is negative and one is positive, as you can see. So with the same sign rule, it's real simple. Just simply add the numbers, and keep the sign. So add the numbers, keep the sign. So without looking at anything, by the time I'm done, I'm going to add 23 plus 18, and I know I'm going to get a positive result here because both numbers are naturally positive. And here, I'm going to get a negative result because naturally we can see both numbers are negative. And I'm not going to do any actually evaluating here. I'm just using these examples as a way of reminding you of what the rules are. We'll do some evaluating a little bit further down in these notes. In the case of the signs being different, we're going to essentially subtract. I'm going to use terminology of larger versus smaller. We're going to say larger minus smaller. And what I really mean by that is the absolute value. So in this case, the negative 43 is the quote unquote larger number because it has a greater absolute value than positive 15. And then when we subtract, we're going to keep the sign of the larger number. Okay? So in this case, the negative wins out. So I know I'm going to get a negative answer here because that is the larger number. Negative 43, as we said, has a greater absolute value than 15. In this case, I know this is positive, right? And that's the larger number. So this is going to win out as a positive answer after I subtract the two values because 68 has the larger absolute value. Okay, so those should all be rules that are familiar to you. So when we move on with these notes, this will be a little more helpful as we use a method down below that I call the scoreboard that I'm sure you've heard about. So moving on to subtraction, this should be familiar to you as a phrase. Many of you have heard keep change opposite because when we subtract, we really want to convert to addition. And to do that, we keep the first number. Oops, let's erase that. We keep the first number. We change the operation. We change subtraction to addition. And then we take the opposite of the second number. So what that looks like is that in the case of this being subtraction, I don't like subtraction. So I'm going to keep the negative 25. I'm going to change the subtraction to addition. And because that's already a positive 43, I'm going to change it to saying that I'm adding the opposite, which is negative 43. In the case of the next problem, I'm going to keep the first number, negative 19. I'm going to change from subtraction to addition. And I'm going to now add the opposite of negative 87, which is 87. Now, both of these, by converting with KCO, with keep change opposite, allows me to look at these in the context of being an addition problem. So I'm going to have a nice simple set of rules. Either I'm going to be looking at two numbers that I add that are the same sign, which you see here, or I'm going to be adding numbers with different signs, as you see in the second problem. So I'm going to be able to add these two numbers and keep the sign. I'm going to be able to subtract these, larger minus smaller, keeping the sign of the larger number. Okay? So how do I keep track of all this? If I need a method, well, I use what is called the scoreboard method. Now, the scoreboard method just allows me to set up essentially like what it sounds. Well, first of all, I want to treat this so when I use a scoreboard method, it's always with addition. So if I need to use KCO to convert something to addition, I do that first, and then I create my scoreboard. So in this case, I create a simple scoreboard. I put a negative sign on the left side, a positive sign on the right side. I'm already addition. And now I just stack my numbers. My 43 is negative, so it goes on the left side. My 15 is positive, so it goes on the right. And as long as these numbers are on different sides, I'm going to subtract them. So they're in different columns. So I'm going to do 43 minus 15. That gives me 28. And I'm going to keep the sign of the number with the bigger values. So I know that negative wins. So by the time I'm done, I know that negative 43 plus 15 is negative 28. So again, I create a scoreboard with a simple negative and positive side. Now in this case, since I am not looking at an addition problem, the first thing I do is with KCO, and I change it to addition. And then I just put the numbers in their appropriate columns. So in this case, the 25 is negative, the 43 is negative. When the numbers are in the same column, this tells me I'm simply adding the numbers because they're the same sign. And in this case, I know my answer will be negative. So let's see. I'm going to get 5 plus 3 is 8. I'm going to get 4 plus 2 is 6. And again, I'm going to remember that my answer is negative because both numbers are in the negative column. And my outcome will be negative 68. One more time, I take a look. If I'm not addition already, I use KCO. So I'm going to rewrite this as negative 19 is my keep. Change, where I change from subtraction to addition. And I add the opposite of negative 87, which is 87. Once again, I set up my scoreboard. Given that my 19 is negative, it goes on the negative side. My 87 is positive, it goes on the positive side. Because my numbers are in opposite columns, I will always subtract. I only add when the numbers are in the same column. And I'll realize that my answer is positive because that's the quote unquote bigger number. So with some borrowing, looks like I get, interestingly, negative 68 again. That's just by coincidence. Okay, so I know I'm going through this fairly quickly, but this should all be review in nature to you. So this is just a quick brush up of the rules. So moving on to multiplying and dividing, the nice thing is the rules are the same. I just simply count up the negative signs. If I have an even amount, I get a positive result. And if I have an odd amount, I get a negative result. So you can see, going back here, I have 1, 2, 3. I have 4 negatives. That's a positive, that's an even amount. So I'm going to get, by the time I'm done doing my multiplying and dividing left to right, I'm going to get a positive answer here. And likewise, in my other example, I have 1, 2, 3 negatives. That's an odd amount. And that tells me I'm going to therefore get a negative result. Okay, so that's just a real quick review. Refer back to these notes as you need to, and there'll be some practice to go along with this, so continue with that. We'll talk more in class tomorrow.